The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. I think that many of us have a sort of general impression that really heavy social media use is probably not the best thing emotionally. But we now have a new report which suggests that more than 2 hours of social media use per day double the chances of that person experiencing social isolation. And it claims, as I've talked about before, that exposure to that much idealized representation of other people's lives may cause feelings of envy and therefore isolation. So I've said this before. When you look at someone's Facebook feed, you're basically seeing, other than people who are posting bad news or doing what I call vague booking, which is posting something like, I just can't believe some people, really makes you wonder. And then of course the point is for people to say, oh, what are you referring to? That's what I call vague booking. I didn't come up with that.
So it's kind of gossiping if you kind of are inside on the joke or whatever it is.
It's trying to get people to ask you about what's going on. But other than that, people are self-selecting positive things to post. They're so happy about a trip or a meal or something at work, etc. So if your understanding of other people's lives is based just on the mostly positive self-selected moments that they are choosing to share on social media, you're going to feel like, hey, look at it's all positive stuff. I had like one positive thing this week, but I also had some challenging things. It's going to make you feel envious, like your life is not going well. And according to this report, increasingly isolated. It's sort of obvious that this will happen.
This comparison may seem kind of out there, but I think it makes sense. It's like when people say that movies back in the day were so much better than they are today. That's, I think, because you're comparing an average movie in today's day and age to the classics, the best of what was out there in the 50s and 60s.
Because you've forgotten the bad movies from then. So you're basically comparing all movies today to the ones that are so good from another era that you actually remember them.
And like you said, people want to post the best things about what's going on in their life. They want to post about the new job that they got, or the new relationship they're in, or a picture of their kids. But most of the time, those people are staying home depressed, just like the people that are going on Facebook themselves.
Well, there's sort of a double-edged sword, which you're getting to, which is generally the more time that you are on social media, by sheer math, because a day is 24 hours, the less time that you're doing non-social media stuff. And that also can feed into it, because if you're on social media at the expense of not doing something else, the not doing something else is also probably not that great for you. I think it stands to reason.
Absolutely. That was part of the reason why I was off social media for quite a few years. I mean,
really?
Another part of it was just like I didn't really care what other people were doing. And then I got to a point where like I wanted to brag about the things I was doing. So, got a new job and everything else. I wanted to be back on social media, but I don't spend too much time on it.
Yeah, I try not to either. I mean, mostly it's just show-related stuff,
Right.
Okay, very strange story from Austin, Texas. Strange is kind of an understatement. A caller to the police reported a man outside her window having sex with a fence Wednesday night, according to an arrest affidavit. Eliodoro Estala, 32, was arrested for indecent exposure after he was seen exposing himself and making lewd gestures around 11:25 a.m., very early to be engaged in this type of behavior, at a residence of North Lamar Boulevard in Austin, Texas. The caller told police she was looking out of her duplex window and saw Estala, her neighbor, urinating on the side of the fence that separates their property. The woman started filming Estala with her cell phone, and then the man saw her and took off his clothes, according to the affidavit. According to that same affidavit, Estala put his mouth on the chain link fence and stuck his tongue out, and then, quote, began having sex with the fence. The woman had both pictures and video to show the police. When police arrived, the man appeared to be intoxicated, was uncooperative, and told police he was inside the apartment. I don't know what that means. Like he was standing outside, but said, I'm in the apartment right now. I don't even understand.
There's a videotape of you clearly outside of the apartment too.
Yeah, very odd.
Yeah.
This is a strange story, isn't it?
I don't think he did it out of any sort of sexual gratification at all. I'm going to defend him in that way.
Okay.
I think he was just either in a drunken stupor or was just angry at his neighbor, and that's how he chose to retaliate.
But isn't this sort of like the Mel Gibson thing? He doesn't really have any anti-Semitic beliefs, but when he drinks, he just says things he doesn't mean. It's like, okay, so you would never have sex with a fence when sober, but you have alcohol, and all of a sudden you're like, what the hell? I'm gonna have sex with a fence.
Do you think this guy fantasizes most of the time when he's sober about having sex with a fence?
I
And
don't know.
how do the semantics work on that? I mean, is this a picket fence? This is a wire fence, correct?
That's
I
an
don't-
incredibly relevant
I
question.
hope it's not a picket fence.
And I don't know the answer to that. We've done a few stories like of a woman who was in love with a train. I don't know if it was like the train or a particular train car that she saw regularly. There was a woman who was in love with a Ferris wheel and wanted to marry it and believed that she was having a relationship with it. For some reason, I find, even though in a way it's weirder because it's an inanimate object, something about the people who believe that they're in or want to have relationships with animals, romantic relationships with animals, that actually creeps me out more than someone who's like, yeah, I'm in love with my computer or my car or something.
It definitely creeps you out more because there's another sentient being there that could be impacted by it. But I think it's definitely stranger to be into an inanimate object. I don't understand how people can get to that point.
Yeah, no, it doesn't really make sense. I once grew up with someone who was like really attracted to bonsai trees, and it was just a really weird thing.
Oh, yeah?
No, I'm kidding.
Did he see a lot of bonsai trees in Argentina or wherever you grew, Massachusetts?
No, there's not really that many. I'm actually growing a bonsai tree right now.
Are you?
Yep.
I hope your friend doesn't make a visit.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'd have to protect it. It's like you got to keep child molesters away from children. I'm going to want to keep this friend away from my bonsai tree.
You got to keep this man away from fences now.
I really, I don't know if this is going to work, but I got one of those bonsai kits. It was $8, so I'm predicting that it may never actually grow. And I did the whole process where, like, first you soak the seeds for 24 hours, then you put them in a damp paper towel in the fridge for 7 days. It's called like cold something. I don't even know what it's called. Then you take 2 of them and you plant them in this little peat packet thing in a pot. And then once they sprout, at a certain point, you determine which is the stronger of the 2, and you cut the weaker one to allow just the one strong one to sort of grow. I have a friend who runs like a landscape company and has a degree in all this sort of stuff. He said that it's incredibly unlikely that this thing is going to live, even if it germinates, because it's really difficult to keep bonsai trees alive, apparently. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Well, it seems like even if it doesn't work, you've gotten your $8 of entertainment out of it just from the lead-up process.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the fact that it was an 8-day process, 24 hours plus then 7, just up to planting, there's not much entertainment you can get that will last 8 days for $8 these days, this day and age. Okay. There are millions of gallons of raw sewage spilling into the Pacific Ocean, and it's reaching the shores of Southern California from Mexico. And now there's a bi-national investigation into this spill. Again, the spill originated in Mexico, but it has reached California. It was first spotted early last month on the beaches of San Diego, all the way down into Mexico, according to the International Boundary and Water Commission. This, to me, of course, it's a horrible story that raw sewage is spilling into the ocean, pollution, it's a disaster, terrible. But it's a bigger story. It's a story about how there can be very significant repercussions to policies that are meant to impact only what's going on the other side of these imaginary lines that we call country borders. What's happening in Japan, for example, with radiation and Fukushima, et cetera, it comes over to the west coast of the United States. Radiation, the impact on seafood, et cetera. And it's very rarely considered, seemingly, by Trump, his cronies, and Trumpists, that these sort of unilateral decisions to, quote, do things to other countries, they can also impact what happens in the United States. And this is sort of a perfect example.
And now you see the United States and the United Kingdom, and I'm sure there's so many other examples. These countries are starting to pull back, not trying to accept the fact that we're living in a more global society now, having more nationalistic sentiments. And issues like this, I mean, when these things happen, it goes to the idea that we really need to have these types of commissions because, as you said, air, water, they don't have any respect for these arbitrary lines between countries.
Absolutely. Pollution and also a major one. And I think I recently read that some of the LA smog is because of the jet stream and Chinese pollution.
Yeah.
I believe does that ring a bell? Did we do that story?
I don't know.
Maybe
I'm not sure.
that was a bad dream I had. And
Yeah.
it's not, no, but I do think that it is a real thing.
And it's why the Paris Climate Agreement is so important, because you have to get every single country on board with it.
Absolutely.
We had to think about 200, and because otherwise, the efforts that you make are going to be fruitless.
Yeah, and this is why the idea of the nationalism, you can make an argument that the nativist nationalism of the Trumpists doesn't make sense from a sort of moral or ethical perspective. But you can also make a really strong case that it doesn't actually make sense from a practical perspective either. And it actually might be the stronger case to make if you're trying to convince a Trumpist. I don't know. I guess I'd have to think about it a little more.
This would be Exhibit A, I think. Any sort of environmental issues that you can't turn away from the rest of the world.
The problem, though, is those are often the issues that the Trumpists are less likely to believe are even based in fact.
But I mean, that's very true when it comes to like climate change. But I think for the most part, people accept that pollution exists, and clearly that sewage can be, left out into the water and affect the beaches along both countries.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's right in front of them.
I hate these stories because, especially when it comes to, I don't know why, just the pollution of oceans really bothers me. And what happened in the Gulf. So the Gulf now, Gulf seafood, it's all a disaster ever since the Deepwater Horizon spill. The West Coast, you've got fish and trash showing up with radiation as a result of what happened in Fukushima. The Southern California coast, you've got raw sewage coming from Mexico. We've got our fair share of problems in a lot of Northeast waterways, although I'm less specifically familiar with what's going on. But I know that
the Mariana Trench,
Mariana Trench pollution, yeah. I mean, I know that as far as the Atlantic, there are definite issues as far as pollution and like cold water salmon and this type of thing, and having to go further and further out from shore in New England for a lot of the seafood fishing that is so common for the cuisine of this part of the country. One of the things I hate the most is when I go to the beach and I'm just stepping in trash. It's I don't know why it disgusts me. And the idea of being at the beach and throwing a cigarette butt into the sand, it's vile.
And I'm sure we're going to beaches where they're relatively maintained by the people who work there.
Maybe.
I mean, if you're just going to any random coastal area in the world, pick your point, they're not going to have the same treatment. It's
bad. It's absolutely horrible. And it's one of the things that has negatively impacted. I don't get to the beach that often. And when I go, every time, if sometimes it's like a year or longer between even just going out to like Cape Cod or something, and the amount of trash that's on the sand and in the water, it is just disgusting.
Fortunately, it's getting worse with plastic.
I don't see it getting better anytime soon, that's for sure. That's it for the bonus show. Talk to you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.